If you don't know who Bayard Rustin was, you're not alone.
Bayard Rustin has been termed a lost prophet of the civil rights movement.
That's actor-playwright Michael Benjamin Washington. He's written a play called Blueprints to Freedom, an ode to Bayard Rustin. It's getting a world premiere at the La Jolla Playhouse, and Washington is playing Rustin.
Bayard's mind was 50 years at least ahead of its time, and many thought he was going to be the Western world's Gandhi.
Passive resistance was Gandhi's approach.
Rustin was an outspoken black activist and a rising star in the movement. He was sent to Alabama to counsel another star and to teach him the tenets of nonviolent civil disobedience.
He passed it on to Martin Luther King Jr., who then took it on for the Montgomery bus boycott.
Passive resistance.
Rustin became a mentor to King, served as his executive aide, and ghostwrote many of his early essays. But for King, Rustin was not an ally who could share the spotlight.
They had a very contentious relationship in the sense that Bayard was openly gay. He was a former communist. So those two huge factors kept him marginalized for the duration of his career.
Bayard Rustin never hid his homosexuality, and he paid a price for it. In this scene from the play, Rustin and King meet after a 2-year rift. It's set in Rustin's office just a few months before the March on Washington.
When it was time for me to excuse myself from the movement because of the threat that I'd be exposed, I did so gracefully. Eventually, I fell back into the good graces, at least the tolerance of leadership. But when you dismissed me from the movement because of a lie, an intentional falsehood concocted by a rival Negro leader, a congressman, a minister who functioned under the direct command of the leaders of the House and the Senate, you never thought for a second to spare me, Martin.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about that scene is that we get to see two men, one of whom we know very well, and the other one that we don't know that well. But we get to see both of them behind closed doors in the intimacy of this office.
Lucy Tabergen is directing Blueprints to Freedom.
It's interesting to tease out the places where they're more vulnerable than we would expect them to be, or the fears and the crisis that they're going through is something that would not have been necessarily a public thing.
When Adam threatened to expose you and me as homosexual lovers, I had one choice. And he did concoct a lie. I did turn against you. We have been derailed, but that was 2 years ago.
As we know, King eventually agreed to speak at the march, which was a great success.
As the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
It was Rustin who organized the whole event, and he did it before email, cell phones, or fax machines.
It's quite remarkable. I can't think of quite so unique a skill set as what he possessed.
Gabe Green is the play's dramaturg.
All of these thousands and thousands of individual documents that showed just how much detail went into the planning of them and the execution of the march.
When the day of the march arrived, Bayard Rustin was still relegated to the sidelines.
Which is why he's not on the program and his name doesn't exist on the literature. But there was a moment we can see that he got to hear his own voice echoing through the mall on Washington.
The first demand is that we have effective civil rights legislation, no compromise, no filibuster, and that it includes public accommodation, decent housing, integrated education, FAPC, and the right to vote. What do you say?
Rustin's story is especially relevant to 2015, with groups like Black Lives Matter on the rise.
President's office, it's urgent.
Washington hopes his play inspires audiences to activism.
Because I'd like not to see any more of our leaders' heads blown off in front of their wives and children. That's what Bayard rustin wanted. Don't just shake your head and say, oh, that's good, or that's bad, or that's too bad. That's not my fight. What are you going to do?
1963!
Angela Carone, KPBS News.